Hello people, welcome to Prep Elevate. Today we'll discuss questions on odd sentences. So we are trying to cover all CAT past year questions. So we'll try and cover CAT 23 slot wise. All right. So we'll go ahead and cover a few questions. But before all of this, let us try and understand what are the rules for odd sentences. So I try to keep the explanation really brief. We'll have a dedicated video where we discuss the concepts for odd sentences. I am just discussing the rules for the purpose of solving these questions. So when do you say that a sentence is odd amongst the group of sentences given to you? Probably that sentence conveys an absolutely different idea, so absolutely not connected. So this is very easy to spot or identify. But usually you do not find such easy questions in CAT. You usually get odd sentences which are somehow related but not absolutely related. So you could say there is a parent and child relationship. Let's say the four sentences relate to a particular topic, which is the parent topic, and then there is one sentence which relates to it, which lies along the periphery of the topic but is not directly connected or related. So that is what I mean when I say there is a parent and child relationship. All right, so we do get questions like this. Then you might also find questions where there are four sentences which are related to a particular time period, and then one of them is from an absolutely different era, right? Different time period. So again, that is again odd sentences. So usually these are the few types that you encounter. One more thing you can keep in mind, let's say there are five sentences, right? Four of them discuss the topic in a positive light. So there is a positive connotation, all right? And then there is one sentence which discusses the same topic but in a very negative light, right? There is a negative connotation. So in that case also I can say that that particular sentence is odd because it disagrees with the tone of the other sentences. All right, pretty much I think this should be enough to proceed with the questions, and like I mentioned, we'll come up with a dedicated video later. So let us start with this question on the screen. So this appeared in CAT 23 slot 1. All right, now before you go ahead and like start solving questions all together and finding out the odd sentence, always remember, do a quick scan. Okay, there is no particular rule as to how you should scan, but scanning is an important part, helps you understand whether you should go ahead with this question or not. So let us say when I'm scanning, I look at questions and I see some familiar words which make me very comfortable with the question. I look at English, I look at systematic rule, I look at numbers, and then I look at words. See, in quotes, always your eyes tend to get attracted towards words which are in quotes. 14 appears, understand, learn, English speakers, right? So more or less, this looks like a good question for me to start. I am pretty, sure that this looks like a comfortable setting for me to start, right? Now, let's discuss the question. In English, there is no systematic rule for the naming of numbers. After 10, we have 11 and 12, and then the teens, 13, 14, 15, and so on, right? Pretty interesting, right? This base looks very interesting to me. Even more confusingly, some English words invert the numbers they refer to. The word 14 puts the 4 first, even though it appears last. So both of these, sentences, even if I have not understood anything, I know they're discussing rules of naming numbers, right? In statement 1, it is clearly stated, and statement 2 seems like a continuation, even more confusingly. All right. Statement 3, it can take children a while to learn all these words and understand that 14 is different from 40. So I have not read the other two sentences, but I know this is slightly different from the first two because it discusses about children, which I have not read in the first two sentences. I am not sure if this is the odd one. All I know is children did not appear in the previous two sentences. So probably, this takes a different tangent. Statement 4, for multiples of 10, English speakers switch to a different pattern, 20, 30, 40, and so on. See, we go back to discussing rules, right? We go back to discussing rules which we discussed in statement 1 and statement 2. Now, statement 5, if you didn't know the word for 11, you would be unable to just guess it. You might come up with something like one team. Okay, so this is a very interesting statement. Again, it discusses the rules. It discusses the rules that if you did not know that the word for 11, you if you just follow the rules blindly, then you might come up with something like one team. Understand something? This follows what we discussed as the parent and child relationship. We have four sentences which discuss the rules: statement 1, statement 2, statement 4, statement 5. They all discuss the rules of how we name numbers in English. And then there is a statement 3 which discusses about, children might find it difficult to understand these words, right? Because there is no set structure to rules, right? There's no set structure of naming. So they might find it difficult to grasp. Now, this discusses something which is related but not directly related. Okay, so it discusses something which lies along the periphery. Hence, 3 is the odd sentence here. Okay, now if I have to give my opinion on this question, this is a very, very simple question. If you pay a little bit of attention to this, I think this should be attempted in exam conditions. All right, now the next question. Okay, before I discuss this, I'll have to mention something. A lot of people develop this habit wherein before they point out the odd sentence, they try to arrange the other sentence in a sequence, which is very similar to what we do in parajumble. So we try to find out the sequence. So we find out the connections between sentences. While that is a good method, but it may not be applicable for all questions, and also sometimes might make your attempt lengthy. So remember, even if you do not know the sequence, like the perfect sequence, like you should know in parajumbles, it is absolutely all right as long as you are able to spot the odd sentence. Perfect? Right. Next question. Again, we go back to our roots. First, we find out, we just scan and we try and understand what are we talking about. Okay, I look at appreciation, I look at person's mind, strategic, language acquisition, interaction, reflexive thought, moral judgment. Not a big fan of such questions. Why do I say this? If you have done a little bit of study for CAT, you might have realized this language, cognitive abilities, such topics are not very easy to attempt. And even at first glance, I am looking at words which are not very simple. Remember the last question, we had English, we had language, we had children, we had naming, right? And here we are talking about something which is really dense, at least in the first go, not very easy to comprehend. Now, I am looking at theory of mind, I am looking at scholars, I am looking at cognitive abilities, speculations, I am looking at evolutionary origin. Like I mentioned, I will not be inclined to attempt this question as soon as I see it, because this does not look like a very favorable question to me. I might come back to it later if I have time after attempting all the easier ones, but not a look, see, an attempt kind of question, at least for me, right? Now, let us discuss this. Having an appreciation for workings of another person's mind is considered a prerequisite for natural language acquisition, strategic social interaction, reflexive thought, and moral judgment. Now, all I have understood is, you need to have an appreciation, you need to appreciate how the other person's mind is working, and that is a prerequisite for understanding language acquisition. For social interaction, you need to have an appreciation, or let's say an understanding of how the other person's mind is working. These keywords are slightly, it I would say domain oriented probably, so I may not be able to understand it completely. So it is a theory of mind, though some scholars prefer to call it mentalizing or mind reading, which is important for the development of one's cognitive ability. So we are basically, trying to understand what theory of mind is all about. Though we must speculate about its evolutionary origin, it's that means there is some discussion that has happened before this. That is why this it's is mentioned. We do have indications that the capacity, so definitely some capacity we've discussed, right? And that is why here we are looking at the capacity evolved sometime in the last few million years. All right, we're discussing about our timeline. This capacity develops from early beginnings in the first year of life. Again, this capacity, that means some capacity here we are talking about, right? I don't know where this capacity is mentioned, but some capacity in the first year of life to the adults fast and often effortless understanding of others thought feelings and intentions. Okay, so we are talking about this capacity which develops in the first year, all right, and then it evolves. One of the most fascinating human capacities is the ability to perceive and interpret other people's behavior in terms of their mental state. All right, this is what all of this boils down to. Statement number 5, where we have discussed this human capacity. Remember this capacity, the capacity, which capacity? Statement 5, the capacity to perceive and interpret other people's behavior in terms of their mental state. Now if I work backwards, I might be able to understand that all of this is connected, and then I'll be able to spot the odd one. All right, so this tells me that this looks like a good beginner intro kind of sentence to me. And then we are talking about how this capacity develops from early beginnings, connected. Then we are talking about speculations about its origin, how it developed in the last few million years. And then statement 1, where we are talking about we need to have an appreciation which is important to understand working of other people's mind. Suddenly there is a statement which is 2, which again mentions a lot about cognitive abilities, it mentions a lot about mentalizing, mind reading, but then we are talking about this specific capacity to understand behavior in terms of mental state. All right, so although 2 looks like a very good introductory statement when you first read it, after reading all the statements I have realized that it is talking about something which might be remotely related but not directly related as far as these sentences are concerned. So 2 is the odd one out here. 1, 3, 4, and 5 are interconnected. Very easy to understand that 4 and 5 will definitely be connected. Again 3, if you put in a little bit of thought, you will understand we are talking about the capacity, we are talking about its evolutionary origin, right? Origin of this capacity. 1 and 2 might be slightly difficult, not very easy to eliminate, and that is why I mentioned not a very big fan of this question. At least during exam conditions, it might not be the question that you should, ideally start working with, right? But if you give it a little bit of thought, you'll understand 3, 4, 5, and 1 interconnected. 2 looks connected but is not. 2 is the odd one out here. All right. So slot 1 had these 2 questions on odd sentences. We'll discuss all the questions in the upcoming videos. So stay tuned for those videos. Thank you so much.